we're back to this image. Could you please explain the use of the wand again?
Yeah, so it's a color changing lightsaber. Just think of it as that.
Can you show the wand again just for a minute? Can we just step backwards and just show the wand? Is that okay?
Yeah, let's get back to that. So here's the wand here.
Right, great.
Okay,
and is that the one that changes color by itself?
It is. Now, don't get too excited about this particular tool. We can rewind to the image before it, but don't start scribbling. Well, you can scribble down the name of it if you want. But this tool, and don't panic when I tell you this, because there are plenty of tools that do a similar job. This went out of production about maybe 9-10 years ago, something like that. It was manufactured by a German company, LED Lenser. They make some incredible torches, by the way. But they also created this tool, which was actually intended to be a garden light. The base, the very bottom of the base of this tool inverts into a metal spike, and you're meant to stick it in your grass, and it lights up. But light painters, of course, discovered it and thought, well, let's have a go with this. And lo and behold, it creates beautiful light paintings. These things are very difficult to get a hold of now. They sometimes pop up on eBay if you have the patience and time to go looking.
So, am I right in saying, and I'm just trying to preempt what the question was, can you go back to the last image where we're seeing the tall image of it? There you go. So this is a complete 360 acrylic, yes?
It is, yes. So it's constantly visible to the camera as a light painting tool.
Which makes you constantly visible as well, I suppose.
Well, if I held it close to my body, it would illuminate me slightly. But because I normally, when I'm using this tool, hold it out in front of me as I'm walking, it's pretty easy to remain invisible whilst using this. And because when you're creating the ribbon shapes, they are created by a walking and kind of, swaying motion. I kind of almost describe it as if you're conducting an orchestra in the dark. You kind of wave around your hand. You're constantly moving, and so your image forming alongside this light painting tool is very difficult. And it's not the brightest light painting tool either. This light painting tool is fairly dull. When you see it to the naked eye, it's not the brightest. Some of the brighter tools require a higher aperture as a result. But because it's not that bright, it struggles to illuminate you when you're using it.
Okay, we'll come back to the brightness of a light painting tool in a minute, because there's a question on that. Can we go back to the wave image then with the tree?
Yeah.
The next one. That's
this one?
Yeah. So this is like a wave. Is this you walking at a steady pace, a slow pace, or a fast pace?
Yeah, so a relatively steady pace. And again, something to note when you try light painting, the speed at which you move your light painting tool will have a profound impact on how bright it is as well. So you can use a dull tool to light paint with, and if you move it slowly, it will increase in brightness. You can move it very quickly, it will have the opposite effect. So the speed at which you move will also be something you need to consider. And again, trial and error will help get you to the point where you realize how quickly you need to be moving with any particular light painting tool.
I'm sorry to jump around, but I think there's questions coming in different ways here. Somebody wants to, is it okay to test the effect in my garden before I go on location? I suppose as long as it's dark, isn't it?
Yeah, very good idea to do so, because that will give you a very immediate feel for what the tool is capable of doing and what designs it creates. Very sensible to do that, yeah.
And I suppose, do you count in your head? That's my question, not you, not them. Are you counting when you walk in? Are you counting when you wave in? How does your mental creativity kind of make sure that you're focused in on that task? Because, if it's left to me, I've never done it before. I'm going to run like a rabbit through the scene as fast as I can, because I think I'm going to be recorded on screen, isn't it? So is there a 1, 2, 3 move? 1, 2, kind of, is it like a dance with the light, or what is it?
Do you know, I often describe it is a bit like a performance art. I often describe it as dancing when I teach my workshops. The speed at which you move, you will understand it almost immediately when you begin your journey into light painting. Start off by moving slowly. See how bright the light painting tool appears to the camera. Move a bit quicker. You'll find a happy medium very quickly. I do promise you that. It's like any other photographic technique in terms of, practice makes perfect, and repetition will increase your kind of database and knowledge bank of how it all operates. But experiment, and change up the speed at which you move, and change the movements that you make with your body and your hand. And you'll yield different results all the time. And again, when I'm teaching, I often kind of stand in front of my camera in front of the class and direct the light painting tool directly towards the camera lens, so it foreshortens, and then I will straighten the light painting tool or the lightsaber so that the camera is picking up the full width of the tool. If you think of what's it called? Is it calligraphy? That lovely kind of style of writing. You've got thick and thin lines. Think of it that way as well. How you present the tool towards the camera will have a profound impact on how the light is picked up by the camera lens and the sensor. So think about what's happening to the width of the line as you move the tool.
I think it answers somebody's just whipped up on the question, do you walk towards or away from the camera? It's really left to right and then moving back, I suppose, each time. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, so for this particular image, very much left to right to left, and so on. And what I did at the very edges of the photographic plane is I demarcated on the ground with several white pebbles where the edges were, so I knew when I needed to turn back. Otherwise, when you're working in the dark or relatively dark conditions, you can just keep walking and think, am I out of the picture yet? Am I out of the picture yet? So yeah, it's a sensible thing to keep in mind as well if you're making a piece of work like this one.
Okay. Can you recommend a replacement for the one that you showed?
Yes, and I think we're going to look at that tool towards the end. There's a new tool that's just hit the market. It's called the RGB Critter. Again, it's in my ebook for those that don't want to try and memorize or write everything down tonight. It's a color changing torch, and it's an absolute beauty of a light painting tool because it's got interchangeable tools that you screw into the end of the torch. So it's kind of got a beveled fitting, and you can attach lightsaber attachments, optic fiber tools, light blades, all different things to the end of the torch to use. So you can very quickly interchange your light painting tool just by screwing a different fitting into the torch. But that has lightsaber fittings that yield very similar results to what we're looking at here.
David, there's millions of questions coming through. I'm going to hang on to them now, otherwise I don't think we're going to get through the 8 images. Is that okay? There's some really fascinating ones. One is, I want to shoot my Tai Chi master with a light. All right, and I light with light panels. They are just streaming through now. Okay, so
that's good to hear. Yeah, always a good sign that it's an engaging presentation. Keep them coming. We'll pick them out as we go. But fun enough, and how's this for timing? This is the RGB Critter torch. So these are effects created by attaching different fittings to that torch. Some lightsaber fittings, some light blades. We'll look at light blades shortly. And these are all very much test shots, just very quick basic movements that I've made in front of the camera within about 5-second long exposures, just to test in a blackout studio what kinds of colors and aesthetic effects the torch is capable of producing and creating with different fittings. So that's how these were made. And here is the torch. It looks a bit like this. My hand doesn't look like that, thankfully. It's called the RGB Critter. Very, very, it's an awesome tool, this one. And there are other torches you can buy, like this one here. I think it's called a Claris XT115. There you go, there's a robotic name. It's a Claris torch, and you can buy this light blade fitting into which you then slide different acrylic shapes that are called light blades. They look a bit like this. And when they're illuminated, you can use things like colored gels and felt tip pens to change the color of the edges of the acrylic and things like that. You can alter the properties of the light blades by hand. You can even sand them and things like that to change how opaque they are. And as you can see, the torchlight bursts through the base of the acrylic, illuminating them from bottom to top. And that's your light painting tool. That's what creates images a bit like these.
Fantastic, mate.
Okay, let's get into a different one. So we're on to number 5. This is an interesting one. There's a good story behind this one. This, of course, isn't a light painting. This is the rather eerie and creepy nameless speaker system attached to a block of flats in Guernsey that was kind of vacated some years ago. It's now occupied again. I'll come to that. But it lay empty for years. The States of Guernsey took a long time to decide whether or not they were going to tear this building down or renovate it. And I saw an opportunity because I kind of drove past it every day when I was driving home. And so I liaised at length with the States of Guernsey and eventually gained permission to get the keys to enter into this kind of 8-story block of flats at night time to create a series of light paintings. I got some funding from the Guernsey Arts Commission, and it ended up kind of culminating in a large exhibition in the town centre, which was very, very cool. But before it became an exhibition, of course, I had to make the work. It was called Project Memory Tower because the theme behind this work was that I would enter the building, and in different compartmentalized sections of the building, which all looked identical, by the way. The building was a mirror image from left to right. There were remnants of previous tenants left behind in the rooms, whether it be just a small border of a children's bedroom left behind, or an old notice board with some old notes on it, that kind of thing. It was quite eerie. And what was scarier than that was, this building was empty, but there were a couple of windows that had been smashed. Some of the doors were locked, some were unlocked, and the wind would howl through this building at night time, and some of the doors would slam in the dark when I was making the work. And for insurance reasons, I had to work with somebody else with me. And my friend Ross, good on him, agreed to come along. I think we worked for maybe 10 nights over 2 weeks to create the work. And he's made of tougher stuff. He was pretty hardy, and nothing really got him going. But I was on edge most evenings when I was making the work, and for good reason, I'll tell you, because here's the image I was alluding to. So I made a whole series of images that looked a little bit like this. These orbs of different colors kind of inhabited different spaces throughout the building. This was my kind of repeating symbol of a presence that once was. And we were up on the 6th floor one evening. It was making this shot, I believe. And I said to Ross, "Did you hear something on the stairwell?" And I think I'd already asked him that about 10 times by this point. So he was fed up of hearing that question. And he said, "Stop being so ridiculous." And seconds later, the door burst open behind us, and 2 policemen and a very angry Alsatian came bursting in and had me up against the wall, asking me to explain myself. And I'm still to this day not sure who was more surprised, because I was obviously surprised. It was a horrible fright that I got. But if you think about the policeman's perspective, they probably thought they were going to burst in a room full of youths spray painting the walls or something. Instead, they found a grown man running around the hallway with a lightsaber and LEDs. So I think they were a little bit baffled as well. But anyway, long story short, I was able to show them the emails from the States of Guernsey that kind of described and explained why I should be there and what I was doing, and all was well. And they actually ended up coming to the resulting exhibition, which was quite funny. We had a bit of a laugh about it in the end, because I can tell you that night that happened, I didn't make any more work after that point. I was too full of adrenaline.
Well,
anyway,
I suppose at least as long as you were fully dressed.
Thankfully, I was fully dressed. Yes. Otherwise, the term lightsaber would, we're starting to muddy the water now, I think, Mark.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go move on. Amazing. On a personal question on that image, because it's white walls and everything else, is that more difficult to hide you because of bouncing light and so on?
That's a great question. Kudos for that one. Hats off. Because yes, it was a problem. And if you look at this image very carefully, even if you sit back from your screen a little bit, see, if you look at the base of the orb, can you see the silhouettes of my feet either side of the base of the orb? Those dark patches?
Oh, that's what they are, is it?
Yeah, those are my feet just beginning to ghost into the image, because I was following my usual rule of thumb, because I've followed it for virtually every shot I've ever made, and that is dress in dark, black clothing, etc., etc. And on this occasion, of course, the light was bouncing off a kind of medium tone ground. It was kind of mid-grey, bouncing off the white walls and the ceiling. And it was illuminating my dark clothing and silhouetting me against the light-coloured backdrop. So on this occasion, had I been dressed in lighter coloured clothes, I would have blended in better, which is interesting. But very rare occasions do I work in conditions like that. Very, very few and far between. But that's what's going on there, and that's why that's a very good question.
I suppose with the pebble you talked about in the first image, that's why the orb looks so bright at the base as well, isn't it? It's something to reflect off, perhaps, like it's doing here on the ceiling. Is that why we've got almost that double kind of highlight in this image compared to the first image?
I believe so. I think it's because the base of the orb will generally speaking always look relatively bright, and that's because the light is passing relatively close to the ground and probably bouncing ever so slightly. I shoot a lot of my work on beaches, and of course the sand is relatively light coloured as well, and the same effect happens. And because this is also bouncing off a white ceiling, That's why you're seeing the highlights blowing out at the top. Correct.
Reminds me of Joe 90. That's before your time.
I know what we're talking about.
Yeah, if I saw a young boy in a chair in the middle of that, I'd be running out of that room like so fast you won't believe it. But
you know, I'll show you where I live on social media at the end. But if you find, you know, the broader body of work that I created for this particular project online, you'll see some terrifying images spaces that I discovered within this building. There was one area in the basement of this building, because we were working in there in the pitch black, of course. It was nighttime and we weren't putting the lights on, so it was literally pitch black. We had to use head torches to get around. And when we went into the basement for the first time, when we opened the door, there was a line of 6 small prams leaning against the wall with four toy dolls sitting in them, children's dolls, all kind of wonky eyes. And I nearly jumped out my skin when I illuminated them for the first time. I ended up spinning an orb right next to them. Actually, that's one of the resulting images in the exhibition. But yeah, what a terrifying place to work. I'm not sure I would do that again.
Yeah, it's not my cup of tea. Right, next.
No, it was a very cool exhibition there. Right, something a little bit different, because someone asked at the very beginning of tonight's presentation, you know, is any of the work, or can any of the work be figurative, and how do you achieve that? Well, here's quite a cool image. That's a fairly decent example of that. So I regularly teach my workshops in secondary schools as well. These are becoming all the more popular as the months and years tick by. And I was at a school at the end of January in Scotland, and 2 or 3 of the pupils were very keen on appearing in the shots, because they were preparing their portfolios for art school and so on, and they had more particular concepts and ideas they wanted to express whilst I was teaching them. And so this young lady came up and asked me, can you add some angel wings on to, you know, my back and kind of silhouette me or illuminate me in one of the images? So immediately I said, well, let's give that a go, because I've got this insane light painting tool called the Pixel Stick. And the Pixel Stick can light paint images. Literally images. So it's got an SD card slot on it, which I'll show you in just a second. And you can upload images, small BMP files actually, and not JPEGs, but again, the thing comes with an instruction leaflet and so on. It's pretty intuitive. You upload your images into the Pixel Stick, and then you program it. You can set the timer, how long you want the lights to flash, and it's got 200 LEDs running from top to bottom. It looks like this. This is the little control panel. On the other side of that, on the other side of the face of this tool, you've got the SD card slot. That orange button is to begin the lights firing. And the tool is 1.8 meters long, and it contains 200 LEDs from top to bottom. So when you tell the tool to begin firing the lights for a particular image, all the lights start, you know, firing intermittently at different times and in different colors if required. And as you walk with the tool, as you drag the tool along in real time from point A to point B, it creates the image in light. And it just so happens I've got a pair of angel wings uploaded into my Pixel Stick, and that's how we created this image. So I got this young lady to stand incredibly still for about 20-30 seconds, and I walked behind her and light painted in the wings, and then shone my torch kind of, you know, directly towards her back so that she's silhouetted and you can see her feet and everything else. Otherwise you wouldn't necessarily see that very clearly. And held it just a little bit too high, but I actually quite like the effect. That's why you can see that starburst coming out of the, you know, just where the top of her head is, because it's directed towards the camera lens. So that's how this image was made.